It's the Rider Rumblings podcast with Rob Vanstone and Murray McCormick.
Hi, I'm Leader Post Sports Editor Rob Vanstone, and, well, we live to see some more Rider podcasts on the Rider Rumblings blog, leaderpost.com. I'm here with my worthy constituent, Mr. Murray McCormick, Riders beat writer non-pareil, and we're talking about, what else? The Grey Cup. So, quite a week we're going to have here, quite a week everybody's going to have as they immerse themselves in all things Roughriders. We're going to have 3 podcasts this week. We're going to discuss today the Riders' victory over the Calgary Stampeders in the West Division Final. We're going to talk about the multitude of storylines that are before us this week, and later on in the week we're going to get to the nuts and bolts of Roughriders versus Hamilton, November 24th, 2013, perhaps a seminal day in Rider history. But let's talk about another key day in Rider history, that being the Sunday just passed and the Riders win in Calgary. You were there. I was watching on a magnificent 21-inch television screen, so you had a better view. What did you think?
The introduction over?
Yeah.
Whew, that was a good long one. That was pertaining for almost as long as the regular
Thanks for being with us, and we'll be back on Wednesday for another introduction.
How about before we go too deep into the nuts and bolts about that, what about the personal experience? I don't know about you, but I'm watching that game when they have a chance to win and going through my mind for everything we've gone through this season, all the ups and downs and the twiggles and the waggles, and the fact that I was in Bradenton in April.
You've mentioned that every podcast.
I know.
I hope we can do a podcast from Bradenton next
week. I was in Bradenton in April, and I kind of got a little. It was kind of like a little bit emotional. That it seemed to be. We get a little attached to these guys. We do. We're supposed to be cynical. We're supposed to be distant from them. But it was kind of. I thought about guys like Ricky Foley and G. Simon and Darian Durant, how much work they put in to get to this point, to get to the Grey Cup, and it was kind of a satisfying moment. I don't know about you. You've been through this. You've been through a lot of these moments with the teams. I don't know if they get to be emotional. I don't know if that's the right word, but it just seemed to be a sense of accomplishment, a sense of also a sense of awe and nervousness that what we're headed into as journalists into this Grey Cup week of just incredible interest and stuff in that. But did you feel a little bit of that? Some of the romance and stuff you have for Darian, did that kind of spill over?
And Henry's here this week.
Oh, geez.
The thing that occurred to me right off the bat was, okay, we've covered Grey Cups before, and believe it or not, we've actually covered Rider Grey Cup victories before. But nobody's ever seen a week like this before. Riders at home for a Grey Cup. So there's an entirely new dynamic that we're introducing, an entirely new buzz that's enveloping the city and the province and everybody who cheers for the Riders. And from a personal standpoint, I think you have to feel good for a lot of the people in the organization who've faced the daggers and dealt with the detractors and had all sorts of people carping on them, including the likes of us. And you look at a guy like Brendan Tammon, who was so maligned 2 years ago and even last year, and now he's one win away from his first Grey Cup ring and having had a number of opportunities. Darian Durant, especially, after the way that he's been maligned over the years and the kind of the stuff that he puts up with week after week, and suddenly he's 43 for 53 in the playoffs, and nobody has any grounds for criticizing him. So from that standpoint, when you deal with people the caliber of Brendan Tammon and Darian Durant over the course of the year, and then you see that a lot of what they're doing is vindicated, I think you have to feel good for them as people, because those are two people who really deserve the accolades, because they've certainly dealt with the other end of the spectrum.
It's kind of, and I was also thinking that too, amongst the good things, how badly Calgary played. We're giving the Riders a lot of credit, and justifiably so. They did good things on offense. They chased the ball down on defense. They forced turnovers. They scored when they had the ball. But that Calgary team imploded. Murray's Price, where he was thinking on that play, he probably thought he was so fast that he could outrun anybody on the Riders except for Tristan Jackson.
Yeah, Tristan Jackson, he didn't even have a job in football 2 months ago. You talk about personal stories.
Yeah. And
2 forced fumbles yesterday.
I know.
Or on Sunday.
So Maurice Price, I watched it again last night. He was gone. And he just kind of said, maybe that's that cockiness, that arrogance that you've heard about Calgary kind of coming to the front. That first pick, Jeremy McElvain, I think Kevin Glenn still hasn't seen where he came from in that.
That was great coaching, because obviously they knew what to do. They were ready for the middle screen, and they didn't really even pressure Kevin Glenn on that play. That was Jermaine McElvain, who hasn't been playing a lot lately, was still schooled enough to anticipate that play. And to me, that's not only a testament to Jermaine McElvain, that's a testament to the people who are preparing to play.
I haven't seen 7 turnovers in one place since I was at Tim Hortons the other day. So.
I think we're both carrying them. Thanks for bringing back some extras.
That's a night, yeah. And so I just, and you kept looking at the numbers going up and up and going, okay, but they can't possibly have another turnover. And there's another turnover.
I mean,
That's Sinopoli dropping.
Jeff Fuller, 3 of them, I mean, Sinopoli gains 28 yards, fumbles. Jeff Fuller gains 45, 46 yards, fumbles. Maurice Price off for 57 yards, fumbles. So huge plays that if they don't relinquish the ball, they're huge plays for Calgary. They end up being huge plays for the Riders. A fumbled punt return that the Riders, Tyrone Brackenridge recovers deep in Calgary territory, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just massive screw-ups by the Stampeders, but somebody's got to force those turnovers by and large. And the way the Riders went at the Stampeders, and even after somebody gets 30, 40, 50 yards, they are still pursuing the football with an appetite. That's what they're coached to do. That's what the coaches are driving into their heads every day. Don't give up on a play. And how many times was the wisdom of that approach borne out on Sunday?
Here's an insight alert. They practiced that. I was really, and I have to be honest, sitting at practice every day isn't exactly a career changer. It's pretty boring, repetitive, and you sit there and you watch. But they work on that stuff. They work on getting to the ball. They work on stripping the ball. They work on finishing plays. And Sunday's game epitomized all that, even offensively. And they just kind of went, wow. I guess that's why they do practice. And it's I'm not being facetious or kind of laughing, but it is true. They work. That's not just a fluke that they went out and did that on Sunday. That was stuff they've worked on all season, and boom, it worked in the game. Just like one of the neat parts about watching that game is Corey Sheets lined up as a wide receiver. Because we all kind of figured, how are they going to get Jock Sanders and Corey Sheets on the field together? And they didn't do a lot, but they did, and they handed off to Jock Sanders, and he had a big run. We never saw that all year. And this is an opportunity to put a little different wrinkle in there, and maybe that's why they close practice, so they can put in some of those things that, not that I would report on that, I would never say they're doing a play, but we might say Jock Sanders is in the backfield. So that was some good stuff they did in practice, and they reaped all the rewards from it, and now we're all looking at this week going, it's kind of the way of some guys say it's off the hook, but I don't know how this week can be any better. I don't know.
It's an absolute dream as far as angles and storylines, and we'll get into that later in the week. But there's so many storylines just still emanating from the Calgary game.
We're still in that one?
We're all Calgary all the time for this podcast. We're all Riders versus Calgary. And
what a crowd. I guess you guys, and I'm sitting there towards the end of the game when it was getting out of hand, I looked out and I saw all the Calgary fans, assuming they were Calgary fans, going to their cars. And the Rider fans are just moving because Rider fans in Calgary get the seats way up in the corners. And they're all just kept funneling down to the back behind this bench. And it was just, I'm guessing 15,000. I don't think anybody's going to argue with me. There could be more, it could be less. And they were ready to party. And it was cold too. Like it was okay, but it wasn't great conditions. And they weathered the storm to get there. And then they weathered that game. And then they came back and they had so much to cheer for. And Ricky Foley mentioned, he says, we got to mention that. We got to mention these fans made that trip through a pretty bad blizzard on Saturday to get there to support the Riders. So hats off to them. Kudos to them. Kudos to the people that are at 7th or Victoria Avenue in Albert putting together those good old Regina celebrations and waiting for the light to change and then crossing the street, dancing, waiting for the light to change. It was a big day, and I think we'll look back on it as being one of the best days in a while with Roughriders, and it's up to them to make it a better week.
Well, there's so much talk about the Roughriders and what they're facing this week and how gratifying it would be for a number of people, but in the organization if they can take this final step and win the Grey Cup. But you look at the people who sat outside on a cold day, and you look at the people who have bought shares, and you look at the people who have had season tickets for forever, and the people who've thrown money into telethons and bought lottery tickets and sold lottery tickets. And it's not just a victory for the 42 people on the field, and it's not just a victory for the coaches, but there's such a groundswell of support behind this team, and there's so many people who live and die with everything that this team does that when something happens like Sunday's victory, I think there's a lot of people who can revel in it because there's a lot of people who deserve it, and it's not just the people who are wearing those uniforms on game day.
What has made them step up in these last 2 playoff games? Arguably their best games of the year. Look, we thought things were pretty good in the summer. Things were rolling. They were winning 8 of 9, and we saw some good things, but there's really no holes. in these last 2 playoff games.
Isn't this what we were talking about in July and August?
Yeah.
Where's the flaw?
But we knew there were flaws because they weren't scoring as much and stuff. There were things to pick apart, and Calgary was in front of them. But I don't see any holes in these last 2 playoff games. Did you?
No, and the only holes were those that Corey Sheets and Jock Sanders were running through.
Exactly.
And they were playing George Cortez style football in the first half of the type that they were playing in the first half of the year. The defense, I think you pretty much knew the defense was going to play well because that's what they've been doing. Offensively, there had been some concerns over the second half of the season. They started to get things back on track against BC in the West semifinal, and Sunday in Calgary, people saw what they saw in July and August, except no sunscreen required.
Exactly. Toques required. That's a good spot to move on to the next one.
And a very stylish sweater.
Isn't it very stylish? Okay, look good in that, eh?
And
Makes it look slim.
Well, we hopefully we can perform some Photoshop on both of us for the final version of this podcast. We'll do it again later in the week, twice more. Thank you very much for being with us. For Murray McCormick, I'm Rob Vanstone. Enjoy the week, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.